Welcome back to the Empire Builders podcast. Dave Young with you, and alongside Stephen Semple, and we're talking about famous brands. And this is, I guess it's a brand. Sure, it's Bond, James Bond. We're going to talk about. It's not a consumer
Yes.
product.
Well,
It's one of those things where there's a story, and it fits the zeitgeist of marketing in the popular. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Save me, Stephen. What am I trying to say?
I look at it this way. How's it not a brand?
Oh, it's a brand.
The moment I say Bond,
Yeah,
shaken not stirred,
sure.
we all know who it is. And look,
Evil
this
geniuses.
first movie came out in 1962
Yeah,
and has generated billions and billions of dollars, both in Hollywood and spin-offs and product placements. And, we all know about Austin Martin, DB whatevers because of
sure.
Bond. And like, to me, how is this not a brand?
It's definitely a brand. I guess I'm thinking that most of what we've done have been like consumer facing products, and Bond
Correct.
definitely is in that it's selling seats to movies,
Yeah.
and for sure that's consumer focused. So I'm with you. I'm all for talking about Bond.
Yeah.
We just have to think differently. We have to think like an evil genius.
Well, and the other part is it was the world's first blockbuster franchise, and it's estimated that it's done like 7 billion in revenues, right? Like
Yeah.
big, 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 big bucks.
And we're
Now,
always wondering, even when there's no Bond movie out, we're wondering who's the next Bond going to be.
who's the next Bond?
Yeah,
Who's the next Bond? And which is the controversy right now today that we're
sure.
going to come back and talk a little bit about. One of the funniest things, though, when I was researching this, one of the funniest things is how Ian Fleming. So Ian Fleming created the Bond character and wrote the James Bond books, of which, what is it? The original dozen movies or so were all based upon the books. But here's the interesting thing: how he came up with the name James Bond. He's sitting writing and he looks up at this book, The Birds of the West Indies, because he's living in Jamaica, and it's written by James Bond. And he goes, "That's a really cool name. That's why I'm going to name my spy."
I like that. Yeah, people that have single syllable names are always kind of roll off the
Yeah.
tongue.
So I'm not going to go into a lot of the history. We're going to talk about it a little bit. I want to talk about something different, and it's going to seem weird because part of the reason why I believe James Bond, that like the Bond franchise, the Bond movies have become so big and so successful is there's actually a degree of authenticity in all of them. Doesn't that
Mm,
sound weird saying that about Bond?
okay, go with that. I sense that that's true, right? There's especially,
Yeah.
um, man, sort of aspirational authenticity, right? We like to believe that the world has these heroes and these villains, and
Yeah, so first of all, talk about Ian Fleming, the creator of the character and the writer of the books. If you don't know about Ian Fleming did espionage in World War II
right.
at an unbelievable scale. So I'm going to do a shout out to one of our partners, Brian Brushwood, who did a multi part podcast called The World's Greatest Con. Go and listen to that. Ian Fleming plays a big role in that
Mm,
World's Greatest Con. And what the World's Greatest Con was, they created this character and this backstory and this whole thing to make Hitler believe the invasion was coming through Italy.
right.
And it's fascinating. And it's fascinating the role that Ian Fleming created. Like they had to create this whole character for this person. And if you checked into it to make it all feel unbelievably real, and Ian Fleming was a big driver in that. So here's a guy who in World War II was so deep in espionage and so deep in writing that this is the stuff that he created.
So he created a false story that ended up to be realized
Yeah,
and presented as truth,
right.
as a ruse. Yeah,
As a ruse. Now, part of his work, because of a buddy of his, he ended up spending a little bit of time in Jamaica. So he had decided after the war he was going to retire to Jamaica and become a writer. And what he wanted to do is create these stories around espionage and whatnot. But think about it. So the reason why I'm talking about authenticity is what he was doing was he had experienced. He did this in real life, and then now
Yeah.
all he decided to do was do this as fiction,
Mhm.
which I think is part of the reason why there's a degree of believability when you're reading his books. Like, yes, they're fantasy, but kind of not at the same time,
Sure.
right? And I think that's part of the magic of Bond. Now, here's the other part that's magical in terms of Bond. Like, Ian Fleming hung out with guys like Ivor Bryce, who was the heir to the AMP fortune. And the home that Fleming built was called Goldeneye. He named it Goldeneye, which will also end up becoming one of the movies. One of the espionage things that they did in World War II was Goldeneye. So, like, there's this
Uh-huh.
all of these connections. And Ian Fleming ends up having an affair with Lady Anne, whose husband owns the Daily Telegram.
Okay.
So he has this affair with a woman in a very high position. They end up having a child together. She ends up getting divorced and marrying Ian Fleming, which complicated Ian Fleming's life. And he's now also with this woman who's used to the high life. And so he's
Mm.
feeling this financial heat. But also, it creates that exposure to that lifestyle without it being an insider. So the other part that we're attracted to in terms of Bond is elegant. Bond likes the finer things in life, but Bond is not part of the aristocracy. He's not one of
Right.
those guys. He's a bit of an outsider, but he's comfortable there. That's Ian Fleming,
Nice. Okay. Yeah.
right?
Oh, I see
And,
that.
and Casino Royale, which was the first book, was inspired by Fleming going to a casino and seeing some people who he kind of recognizes and he thinks they're former Nazis and decides to take them on in a game of poker.
Mm.
So the whole idea of Casino Royale and that tension where there's actually a battle being fought over the poker table, he experienced. And it inspired him for writing Casino Royale. That's why
Wow.
it feels so real.
'Cause it's yeah, yeah.
So the crazy thing is, I believe part of the success of it is this whole idea of there's these layers of actual authenticity through the books. Now, gets even crazier when they go to pick Sean Connery as Bond. And it was actually the folks that were producing it, which was Covey Broccoli. So Covey Broccoli, and yes, the name Broccoli, right? Broccoli.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
His family actually created broccoli and brought it to the world.
Wait.
So yes,
Wait.
the
They're
name
not
broccoli
named
is tied to broccoli.
they're not named after broccoli. Broccoli's named
It is
after
named
them.
after them.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Stay tuned. We're going to wrap up this story and tell you how to apply this lesson to your business right after this.
Hey, Rick, I'm glad we got out again.
Yeah,
What's going on?
my digital advertising's got more expensive and it doesn't seem to be working as well.
I see.
Nice drive, by the way.
So,
I don't know how I'm going to keep growing. I feel like I'm going sideways, flattening out.
oh,
Yeah,
did you speak to Steven?
you mean this podcast host?
Yep.
Not yet.
Do you like going sideways?
No, I want to be growing.
Well,
Starter session.
yep,
5 iron?
sure. Oh, and you can book your free starter session on this podcast website.
Your turn, Dave.
Let's pick up our story where we left off, and trust me, you haven't missed a thing.
So there's a whole bunch of crazy backstory about how Covey Broccoli ended up becoming one of the folks who got a hold of the Bond franchise.
Yeah.
That's a whole other backstory because he does it with Harry Saltzman. And the only reason why I got to bring up the name Harry Saltzman, fellow Canadian.
Oh, all
So
right.
it was Harry
There we go.
Saltzman and Broccoli who brought the Bond franchise to life. Whole idea in Casino Royale. So there's this whole idea of a war being fought over a gambling table. Now, the interesting thing is Casino Royale did not end up being the first movie because somebody else got the rights to Casino Royale. Broccoli and
Oh,
Saltzman
okay.
got the rights to everything else. And it was only years later that they were able to get back the rights for Casino Royale and eventually make the Casino Royale movie. And man, the other thing that they did well in that movie was creating that tension. But
Yeah.
coming back to Sean Connery, it was Broccoli's wife who basically said, you got to pick Sean Connery. And she saw Sean Connery in this really crappy Disney movie. And it didn't do well. And he was kind of like this goofball character in this Disney movie. But she looked at him and said, this man has the right energy to make
The panache. Yeah.
work. The right panache, the right sexual energy. And in fact, when they brought him in to talk about the movie, he wouldn't read for it. He said, I'm not reading for your movie. I don't read for movies. And they also sort of really liked that cocky, arrogant feel to it. But coming back to authenticity, Connery grew up poor, middle class at best, like he was a milkman. And you had to have this suave, sophisticated feel. So one of the things they did is they hired Terence Young to be the first director. And Terence Young was a British gentleman and knew all of the traits, like the whole vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. That's a Terence Young thing. He's like, that's the only way you drink it. That's not in the books. In the books, if I remember correctly, it's gin, but he's like, yeah. Gin martinis are doing vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. That was a Terence Young thing. But here's the other thing Terence Young did. This is where another piece of brilliance lie. So he looked at Connery and he said, okay, this guy's not comfortable around these things. What can I do? And he has to be. So what he did is he took him to Savile Row, took him to his tailor at Savile Row. He said, make this guy a suit. And he went to Connery and said, you're going to sleep in that suit. Sleep in it. You're going to live in it. And what you're going to do is you're going to feel how great, like these really great fabrics tailored in a really great way. You're going to experience how fantastic they feel. And it's going to become like that second skin for you.
Wow. Okay.
Which is what, if we go back into the 50s, if you were in the aristocracy in the 50s, that's how you felt in your suit.
Sure.
And so he did these things with Connery so that when Connery put the suit on, it was this magical moment where he felt completely like he lived in the suit because he made him live in it.
All right. That's amazing.
And originally I was going to do this literally around the origin of Bond and how they got the rights and all these other things. When I stepped back and took a look at it, I said, you know what? There's a different story here. And the story here is there's this degree of magic that runs through the Bond franchise that is actually these levels of authenticity. Ian Fleming actually being a spy. Ian Fleming actually being that little bit of an outsider to this lifestyle, but yet being comfortable with it and coming into it. And then this whole idea of Bond and then them taking Bond and having then the director who's from that world and Bond who isn't, and how we create that authentic feeling that he's comfortable with all these things, I thought was incredible. And all this leads to a challenge that's facing the Bond franchise today. So the Broccoli family are still involved with Bond. It's now through the daughter, Barbara Broccoli. Now, what's interesting is Barbara Broccoli retains creative control over Bond. So the Broccoli family has creative control. And MGM used to be the distributor, and MGM was bought by Amazon. So Amazon now has the distribution rights. Barbara Broccoli has the creative rights.
Wow, okay.
And if you've noticed, there's been no Bond film for 3 years, and it used to come out every couple of years. And there's not even one planned. And we don't even know who the new Bond is going to be.
Right. But we're all on pins and needles waiting.
Yeah. I came across this, that the reason why it's on pause is there's an ugly stalemate going on between the family and Amazon.
Okay.
And here's what's going on. Broccoli, according to this report, doesn't trust the algorithm-centric Amazon with the Bond character, preferring to use gut instinct with a healthy amount of risk. So according to the Wall Street Journal, where Broccoli cast the unknown Daniel Craig as Bond in 2006, Amazon prefers to calculate risks based upon factors including an actor's past performance or their prior success in similar films. Amazon isn't keen on casting an unknown in a lead role like Bond. The upshot of all of this is there's no script, no new Bond for a new movie, and the Wall Street Journal said to friends, Broccoli has characterized her thoughts on Amazon this way: these people are fucking idiots.
Yeah, I can tell you, You want to hear my idea for a screenplay that would sell like crazy right now? Amazon won't do it.
Sure, let's hear it.
I was going to say that I think, maybe the issue that they're all facing is that Bezos wants to be the new Bond. But here's what the world wants right now: a new James Bond that takes on a Bezos,
Yeah, there you go.
that takes on the oligarchy, right? That's a story we'd all go see. And honestly, I don't know that Amazon wouldn't greenlight a project that takes on a Bezos character.
Probably not. Right. But you see what Amazon is trying to do? Amazon is trying to
Sure.
run this through the algorithm.
Yeah. Screw the algorithm.
But the history of Bond has a degree of authenticity to it. And it's also not unusual that the new Bonds are not well-known folks, because that's kind of how it's always worked with Bonds. So they're not even rerunning their own success criteria, and they're stepping away from what made them great.
See, this wouldn't be hard to solve. Have the algorithm, like in the script, the algorithm picks the new James Bond. He's not even an actor. He's it's just,
There you
we
go.
got a guy.
Well, we didn't mention this, but going back to authenticity, the chase scenes are all live filmed. Like, they're not
Yeah.
CGI.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing is CGI'd in Bond movies. It's real stunts, real car scenes, real.
Sure.
And I think that creates an element that is just under the water that we all feel and love and makes Bond special.
I agree. There's so much that does.
Yeah, and so the lesson here is, I think, for marketers, when they're telling their story, and we all know telling our story is really important, make that story authentic.
Mm-hmm.
People can tell, I believe, on this deep level, whether it's real. And like our business partner, Mick Torbay, always likes to say, real matters. And yes, Bond's totally made up. But you notice how there's these degrees of authenticity all through it. It's pretty cool.
It is. Well, I love it. Thank you for bringing Bond to the table. James
All right.
Bond.
Yes. So you'll have to start the next one. Hi, I'm Young. Dave Young.
Dave Young. Yes.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Empire Builders Podcast. Dave Young here with Stephen Semple, and I don't know what we're doing, Stephen. You said, here's the thing. You said, yeah, we've got a little unfinished business maybe with the James Bond episode.
Yeah, we do.
Is the villain back? What's the deal?
Well, in fact, kind of. So, remember how we talked about how Barbara Broccoli and the Broccoli family were retaining control over the creative of Bond, and that was creating this big challenge in terms of conflict with Amazon, and how she said they were a bunch of idiots, things along that lines. Well, guess what?
I remember seeing that in the news. Yeah, they decided they're going to play along.
They're going to play along. They sold the creative rights to Amazon. It's rumored for like $1 billion. But basically Amazon, MGM Amazon now has complete control, distribution rights, and complete creative control over Bond.
So the villain has won.
So the villain has won.
I see, Mr. Bond. You're mine now.
Yeah, so I suspect that what we're going to see is similar to what happened with Star Wars and Disney, where there's going to be, like who knows how many movies and spin-offs and all this
cartoons.
Other stuff. And it's going to be interesting to see, who ends up becoming the new Bond and whatnot. But I felt that between the time that we recorded and I got it produced and we were about to publish it, that this change happened. I felt like we just needed to do this little update.
Sure. Gosh. The mind reels as to what could happen. Where could a corporate entity take a really good story?
Well, we saw it with Marvel and we've seen it with Star Wars. So I think what we're going to see is just a proliferation of stuff, and some will be good and some will be poor, but stay tuned.
Okay.
let's see whether it holds on to any of this real feeling of realism that it always had, or whether that's the first thing to disappear.
Well, there's a future episode for us, whatever the next Bond thing is.
The next Bond thing. All right. Anyway, that's just the update I wanted to do.
Appreciate the update. The villains are winning so far in the world.
Sad but true.
Yeah.
Sad but
Where's
true.
Bond when you need him? Well, he's sold out.
He's been sold.
Thanks, Steven.
All right. Thanks, David.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Please share us, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and leave us a big, fat, juicy 5-star rating and review at Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to schedule your own 90-minute empire building session, you can do it at empirebuildingprogram.com.